Hello my dear friends, you're on the MilitarySummary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of March of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And the most important updates are coming from Berdichi, the village that located to the west of Stepova in the vicinity of Avdiivka. Today we have two geolocated confirmed videos of destroyed Abrams and Abrams-based machine. For example, on this video we can see the burning of one more M1115 assault breacher engineering machine on Abrams Classic. A few weeks ago or a few days ago we got the video of how the Russians managed to destroy another let's say armored vehicles of the type, and this is very interesting information because this is not the main purpose or goal of this type of weapon. They shouldn't be located on the line of combat contact. Their main purpose is to do engineering stuff, but not to support infantry, not to support defense forces or something like this. This video confirms that Ukrainians have significant problems with armored vehicles, and now they are forced to use the Western most modern weapon like Abrams and Abrams-based machines. And this is not the only armored vehicle of this type that was destroyed during the previous 24 hours. Furthermore, we got the video of how the Russians managed to destroy the Abrams tanks itself. On this video we can see either abandoned or already destroyed tank. We see just the, let's say, the final episodes of let's say the tank wasn't moving or something like this. Very difficult to understand. Maybe the tank was really abandoned, but we see that obviously the tank was damaged. Once again, and the Ukrainians currently try to hold the line as long as possible, and this area is in the responsibilities of 47th and 61st Mechanized Brigade. And the most important thing that the Ukrainians currently are forced to use the most modern Western weapon like Bradley, Striker, like Abrams tanks, just with one purpose: to hold the line, to hold the next defense belt. And we are talking about this line. And another important thing is that we understand that all these photos and pictures of destroyed Abrams obviously will reduce and probably will ruin the reputation of Western production manufacturers. And now, but from the other side, we understand that the Western countries, either the Western countries and the Ukrainians, don't have any other option. They are forced to use Abrams, they are forced to use Abrams-based machines on the line of combat contact, just with one purpose: to slow down the Russian progress. Furthermore, when talking about the Ministry of Defense report, just during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 460 soldiers on this direction. When talking about the common situation in the area, of course, we still see that the Russians haven't managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Toninka. They control just the southeastern part of the village. Furthermore, the Russians haven't managed to establish control over Orlovka. They control just the eastern part of the village. And of course, the Russians still haven't managed to establish control over Berdichi. They control just the eastern part. So we understand that with the heaviest losses among the main power, 460 soldiers just during the previous 24 hours, we destroyed a significant number of tanks, Abrams tanks, Bradley's tanks, Striker armored vehicles. The Ukrainians managed to slow down the Russians, but their resources are not endless. Anyway, sooner or later the Ukrainians will be out of manpower, professional manpower, because the Ukrainians are conducting a continued mobilization process every single day. But who can tell us the quality of these troopers who are mobilized today, and they will be sent probably in 2 or 3 weeks somewhere in Avdiivka? Whether they are able to hold the line, to hold the Russians, no. Maybe they can win some time, but maybe not even days, maybe some hours, or in some cases just minutes. So unprofessional army the Ukrainians currently have. Furthermore, when talking about this direction, we start receiving the FAPS bombings of Ocheretino. This is probably the first video from this area of how the Russians were using FAPS on the hill. So as you know, Ocheretino is located on the hill. The Russians attack the temporary positions, and we see that the Russians are moving focus of artillery and aviation focus one more time. Probably, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first video from Ocheretino itself of how the Russians were using FAPS. I don't remember any strikes against the city in the past, and this is very important note. Furthermore, the Russians published today a few videos and few articles about the results of strikes in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, the main area of deployment of Ukrainian forces. There are a lot of buildings, schools, a lot of, let's say, high-rise buildings that Ukrainians currently are using for temporary deployment positions. positions, they concentrated infantry, and then they used this infantry and sent them to Avdiivka direction. Sooner or later, the Battle of Avdiivka will be ended, and very likely not for Avdiivka but the foothold, and very likely in Russian favor. Now we are moving to Krasnohorivka direction. Once again, according to the most of the mappers, the Russians managed to advance and establish additional control over few additional streets in Krasnohorivka, in the area of Krasnohorivka that located to the south of the railways, and this approximately the current progress. And this in progress hasn't been, let's say, confirmed by any geolocation. The only video we have from inside of Krasnohorivka is the complaints of the soldier of Ukraine armed forces. He was telling us that the situation is critical, that the Russians are pushing hard. He's saying that they have no chances to hold them, no chances at all. A lot of soldiers, a lot of his brothers in arms have already died, and so the clashes are very heavy and the Russians are pushing. So if the situation continues developing the same way, obviously sooner or later we're going to receive additional updates, additional progress of the Russian forces. And another important thing, that the Ukrainians are forced to use the most important and the most powerful experienced brigades like 47th Mechanized and the 3rd Azov Brigade to slow down the Russians. For now they managed to do this, but the question is for how long they have so many resources to do this. Furthermore, we got additional reports from Georgievka itself. According to most of the mappers, the Russians had managed to establish control over this territory as well. For now, we haven't still received any geolocated proofs, so let's wait. On the western part of Georgievka, the Russians managed to destroy a local ammo depot that Ukrainians were using for supporting and supplying their forces. As a result of Krasnopol strike, of artillery accurate strike, the ammo depot was destroyed. By the way, today, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published significant number of Krasnopol hits, and we will discuss them. Now we are moving to Novomykhailivka. Important updates are coming from the village. Just a few days ago we discussed that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the farms, and they raised their flag in this area, which confirms the Russian progress. And we see the video. We saw this video a few days ago, and today the Russian sources published additional video from the central part. On this video we can see another flag, and the Russians are saying that this is the church in front of them, this is the church in the video, and this is the church on the map. And but when talking about this flag, this and the previous flag, we need to note a few important things for better understanding of the situation. Both cases, the Russians were making their video from inside of, let's say, fortifications, shelters, and the strongholds. We don't see the Russians somewhere above the sky going from one street to another and feeling themselves very comfortable, which confirms that the Ukrainians are very close to the Russian positions. And according to the author, for example, of this video, the Russians control everything that located to the south of the church and to the east of the church, and the Ukrainians controls everything that located to the west and to the north of the church. So basically the village was split in two parts. And we see once again the Russians are very careful, and for now they don't have strong possibilities to make the video outside the trenches and the strongholds, which confirms that there are still a lot of drones and it's still too dangerous to do this. Now we are moving to Zaporizhzhia Robotyne area. We continue receiving lots of updates. The Russians published additional video of how they were bombing the positions of armed forces of Ukraine in the southern part of Robotyne. This is the fresh video, and this is another evidence that very likely the Russians were forced to fall back from Robotyne towards the trenches that located around the village. From the other side, we still haven't received any updates from the Ukrainians about their control. But the thing that we know for sure is that during the previous 24-48 hours, the Russians were pretty concentrated on the Ukrainian positions among the fields between Verbovo, Robotyne, and Malotokmachka, and Malotokmachka itself, which confirms that during the previous wave of attack to Robotyne, the main purpose of Russian attack was not to capture the village, but to force the Ukrainians to send reinforcements so basically to activate their hidden positions. And very likely that during the Russian attack they activated and they discovered their own FPV drone positions, trenches, local ammo depots, main supply roads. The Russians managed to collect significant number of information. Now they try to work it out, and this is exactly the process of destroying all these things they discovered during the attack to Robotyne. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours there was a very powerful strike in Dnipro. As a result of the strike, the Russians managed to destroy electronic warfare equipment that made lots of problems for the Russians. Now we are moving back to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction, where we continue receiving significant updates. The Russians continue clashes for Ivanovsk, and according to most of the mappers, the Russians completely control the eastern part and the southern part of the village, but without, let's say, control over the northern and northwestern part. And we understand this why we have discussed this in the previous videos. Currently, the Ukrainians still control this landfill, this hill, and from this hill they can control everything that's located along the Zarechnoye Street, Shirokaya Street, so the Russians don't have now the possibilities to move here or to attack the hill. Meanwhile, the Russians are trying to advance on the southern and the southwestern part of the village, and the next Russian goal is to establish control over the farms. And if the Russians are able to do this, they're gonna achieve few more important goals. The first one, they will take control of the farms and the trenches below the farms, and they will be able to enter the tree lines, and they will get the roads and safe attack road towards the main, let's say, supply belt, main supply corridor. And I'm talking about this territory. The Russians are able to cut this line. It's very likely the entire Ukrainian defense belt in Klishchiivka will collapse. Furthermore, we got a very interesting video from Klishchiivka direction. On this video, we can see the Polish crab, and this interesting part of this video is how the Russians managed to destroy the crab. For now, I still haven't managed to classify the type of weapon the Russians were using. Something very interesting and very weird. Obviously, it's not a mortar, and it's not the drone. Maybe it's Krasnopol, because maybe it's Krasnopol. So as a result of Krasnopol strike, very likely that was Krasnopol, the Russians destroyed another crab. And when talking about this direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published significant number of counter-artillery duels. They managed to suppress lots of Ukrainian artillery systems. For example, this is another video of Krasnopol hit. Somewhere among the tree lines, the Russians discovered Ukrainian artillery position and destroyed it. Furthermore, we got a few more Krasnopol hits from Siversk direction. In the vicinity of Svyatopokrovsk, the Russians discovered another Ukrainian artillery position, and as a result of Krasnopol hit, that artillery position was also destroyed. Few more Krasnopol hits we can find in Verkhnytorets and Bilogorovka. The Russians tried to control these two villages 24 hours, 7 days a week, because this is the main supply roads that Ukrainians used to support their defense operation in Bilogorovka, where the Russians during the previous days made few more attempts to attack. Yes, that was Krasnopol. That was Krasnopol, very likely that was a Krasnopol. So once again, very fast, in the very fast mode, but anyway. In Bilogorovka, the sources reported about additional Russian progress inside of the village, but the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to repel. For now, the situation is not so good. It's very difficult to attack Bilogorovka. There is a landfill to the south and positions of Ukrainian forces on the hill on the west of Bilogorovka, so for now, no changes on the ground. South Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything. North Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything as well. Just another Krasnopol hit, and as a result of Krasnopol hit, the Ukrainians lost another artillery position or ammo depot somewhere to the west of Berestova and to the west of Tabaevka. So we see that I believe you've mentioned that these days we see some operational pause from the Russian side, but now we see that the Russians renew the pressure, and the first step, of course, to suppress artillery, and probably after this stage of offensive operation, they will launch the ground attack. Now we are moving to Kharkiv direction. We got a very interesting report, very interesting video from the southwest of Kharkiv, from the village by the name of Olkhovatka. What is so important from this video? On this video, you can see the Russian attack of the village with FABs. Probably 4 or 5 FABs 500 arrived very close to each other in the village. You might ask, so what is so important? Yeah, the picture is very beautiful when talking about the graphic, about the explosions and so on. But what is so important in this video? I'll try to explain to you. If that was the FAB strikes according to the author and according to our visual control, but if we calculate the distance from those FAB strikes, let's say to the Russian border, the distance is around 66 kilometers. 66 kilometers, and this is the edge distance, this is the maximum distance of Russian FABs. So that means that the Russians attack the area that located to the southwest of Kharkiv, somewhere from the border. And this is amazing because that might mean just two things. First of all, either the Russians managed to create the fabs that can fly, let's say not 66 kilometers, but let's say somewhere 132 kilometers, because this is more or less reliable and safe zone that the Russians can use to attack the Ukrainian positions with fabs. But from the other side, we'll remember that during January and February, the Ukrainians have concentrated significant number of air defense forces in the vicinity of Liptsi, and exactly from Liptsi, the Ukrainians managed to bring down the Russian Il-76 with prisoners of war. But from the other side, we got a lot of updates that during the January and February, the Russians managed to destroy up to 2 or 3 Patriots from Liptsi itself and few IRST systems. This village was under very heavy fire, and then we can make another conclusion that if the Russians haven't managed to create one the weapon, one the fab that can fly more than 150 kilometers, that means much more, let's say, worse situation for the Ukrainians. Very likely the Russians managed to suppress completely the Ukrainian air defense in the vicinity of Kharkiv. Once again, just take a look at the strike. The fab arrived not in Kharkiv, not in Liptsi, not between Kharkiv and the border. The Russian fab arrived behind Kharkiv. That means that Ukrainians have complete absence of air defense on Kharkiv direction. And this is very bad piece of news from one side, but from another side, that means that if air defense system in Kharkiv was suppressed by the Russians, and if the Russians managed to establish complete air superiority, that means that it's time to start the ground operation. Because if the Russians are able to use fabs like this, let's say behind Kharkiv, without any air defense, obviously the days of these regions are numbered. I think it's exactly like this. And furthermore, we got additional reports from the same area. The Ukrainians managed to complete the mobilization process for February, and the Ukrainians are saying that they collect or mobilized more than 47,000 of soldiers, most of them from Poltava region, also the region that's very close to Russia, so which confirms that Ukrainians tried to mobilize those from those regions that very likely they will lose during the Russian counteroffensive. And from the other side, the Ukrainians managed to collect another 47,000, but what is the quality of these forces? Now the Ukrainians are losing their best soldiers of 47th and 3rd Brigade in the vicinity of Avdiivka, and they will try to replace them by the new conscripts that have no experience, and obviously their average life cycle is less than 1 month on line of combat contact, so I'm not sure about the quality of upcoming new Ukrainian army. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates about the Polish blockade of the border, and the problem is that Polish blocks, not just the products, Polish blocks, the military help in military, let's say, equipment that the Western countries sent to Ukraine. This is critical and not the, let's say, how the allies should act. When talking about Kherson direction, the Russians destroy another Bucha-Madin air defense system they managed to discover with the drone, and as a result of strike they destroyed the drone. As a result of ballistic strike they destroyed the drone, the air defense system somewhere in the hangar in this village by the name of Kotlярova. And I'll remind you that during the previous days the Ukrainians were attacking and focused on Crimea heavily. Just today the Ministry of Defense reported about another 38 aircraft types that were brought down in Crimea as a result of air defense work. I'll remind you that just a few days ago we got a report about Ukrainian missile attacks with Storm Shadow and MiG-29. So we see that the Ukrainians currently try to stress and overstress the Russian air defense. Obviously those ways to ways were not the last one. Probably the Ukrainians will continue, and let's see whether the Russians are able to, let's say, to support, let's say, long-term air defense work, or there are enough just for 1, 2 or 3 days. We'll see anyway. Sooner or later we're gonna understand this. And that's it for this video. MilitarySummary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.